historian and author of The Soul of America, John Meacham.
John Meacham, you've written a book about the history of faith in this country. I'm just curious, where do you come down on President autographing Bibles in a way that takes up over half the actual space of the front of said Bible?
Well, you're one of the few people who will appreciate this, Joe. At least he didn't do it in red ink. So there is that.
Sure.
But, so the only thing I was thinking is, the only thing I can think of is in my tradition with the Book of Common Prayer, when you're confirmed or when you're married, often you'll have the bishop sign something, but I don't think you do it with the Bible. That's an unusual one. Yeah, exactly. But he always makes the cover, right? So I think it's one more thing, which is Exhibit 7000 of why is it that people of great religious faith have, to use the psalmist, put their trust in this prince.
During the Bush era, that they had to actually bring people in, parishioners in, and let them know that somebody could believe in Jesus and accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior and not support George W. Bush 100% of the time. It is a strange, strange thing that has happened, not in American politics, but in American religion, especially among some evangelicals, where they have decided to render all of their faith, all of their belief, all of their trust in Caesar, and let God take a back seat.
The reason for the wall metaphor between church and state was not to protect the state from the church, but the church from the state. The original idea in the American experience, as so many people came across the Atlantic, Roger Williams, John Winthrop, and the Puritans had their moment, right? They fled persecution and they got here and they established theocracies in places like Massachusetts Bay. But you go to Pennsylvania, you go to Rhode Island, and you begin to see religious liberty as absolutely essential. And it was, as scholars call it, the first liberty. We were about religious liberty and liberty of conscience before we were about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if you are particularly religious, the idea that you would trust the flawed, sinful, temporal world to be the center of your universe is in fact wrong-headed. Your focus has to be on the next kingdom, less so than on this kingdom. And I think that there's been an inversion, particularly since, I think that we've talked about this before. I think the big moment here, the Pearl Harbor of this particular crisis in American faith and American politics, is not Roe versus Wade, but is the 1962 school prayer decision.
I do understand why evangelicals, why conservative Christians responded the way they did against what they consider to be a revolutionary decade in the 1960s and even going into the 1970s. I do understand that. I do not understand, though, putting faith in man above putting faith in God, especially when the man that so many leaders of the evangelical movement are putting their faith in is a man who, again, by his very words and his deeds and his actions every day, every single day, shows that his life's work, his life example, runs counter to every single beatitude, to every single lesson taught in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which really does sum up in 3 verses the ministry of Jesus Christ, and also Matthew 25, where the disciples come to Jesus, and again, this will be the end of the sermon, but the disciples come to Jesus and say, who's going to be seated at the right hand of the Father? And Jesus tells his disciples that it's the person that gives a cup of water in the Master's name and feeds the hungry, clothes the naked, takes care of the poor, visits the sick and those who are in prison, and he goes on. And again, this is not a close call. You line Donald Trump's policies and what he's focused on and up against Matthew 25, the Sermon on the Mount, and the story of the Good Samaritan. Just line it up and make your own judgment.